Welcome back to the Aubergine Chef. Now today we're going to do a fun Halloween holiday episode. We're going to be making tarantula or spider cookies. I first saw this recipe in the Rachel Ray magazine, and I didn't really do much to change it because after the test run, it came out pretty well. It's mostly a stiff chocolate cookie with pretzels stuck into the side and then coated with chocolate. But it's definitely a fun little party cookie that you can pop pretty easily. They have a great effect, and it's fun to make with kids. And it's actually fairly easy. So why don't we go ahead and start making actually the cookie base part of it. On the mixer, I have 10 ounces of butter, and I also have 3.5 ounces of brown sugar and 2 ounces of granulated sugar. In this bowl, I have 11.25 ounces of all-purpose flour, 2.5 grams of baking powder, 1 gram of baking soda, and 3 grams of salt, along with 1/3 of an ounce of unsweetened cocoa powder. And I sifted them all together, and that's mostly just to break up the chunks of cocoa powder, baking soda, and baking powder, so that way they don't get incorporated into our dough as chunks. It helps break up those chunks, and it also helps mix and aerate our ingredients. And I also have 1 egg and about a teaspoon of vanilla extract ready to go. And that's all we really need for the cookie portion. So why don't we go ahead over to the mixer and start mixing up our dough. Okay, so the first step is to cream together the butter and the sugars, the brown sugar and the granulated sugar. Okay, after creaming together your butter and your sugar and it's light and fluffy and airy, we can go ahead and incorporate our egg and vanilla extract. Alright, so after you've incorporated your egg and your vanilla, go ahead and add in all of your dry ingredients. Start on slow speed so you don't get the flour kicking back at you, and then go ahead and increase it to medium speed until the dough comes together. Okay, so once your dough comes together, it should look something like this. It should be a fairly stiff dough. If not, you might want to refrigerate it for a couple minutes. I think I forgot to mention, you do want to use room temperature butter. When you're creaming, you should always use room temperature butter. And then what we're going to do now is we're just going to go ahead and using probably about a tablespoon sized ball, roll out some of the dough, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take some legs, or the pretzel sticks, go ahead and snap them in half if you need to. Mine are a little long. And we're going to go ahead and just push in 4 to 8 pretzel sticks. 4 on each side, or if you had to split them in half, you would use just 4. So your spider has 8 legs. And that's pretty much it until we need to bake them. So I'm going to go ahead and finish rolling out, or getting my spiders out. I should be able to fit, I'd say 16 to a sheet pan, depending on how large the sheet pan is. They spread a little bit, but not very much. The spreading helps capture the pretzels a little bit better, helps cover them a little bit better so they get further in. But keep that in mind because you don't want to push them right up against each other. So I think about 16 to 12 per sheet pan is fine, depending on the size of your sheet pan. Afterward, you want to go ahead and bake them at 350 degrees for about 7 to 10 minutes. If you're doing 2 sheet pans at a time, you want to make sure you rotate your sheet pans halfway through. And what I mean by that is you want to literally switch the positions in the oven, and you want to make sure that you rotate them. Literally rotate the sheet pan. So that way each cookie is in each spot in the oven that it can be for the equal amount of time. So that way nothing gets overcooked or there's no uneven baking. And you want to bake them just until they start to brown around the edges. Okay, so before we melt the chocolate and do that, I want to go over the candy or cookie covering station that I have set up. I have my completely cooled off tarantula cookies on this sheet pan. On a wire rack lined with some parchment paper, and we're going to use that for covering with chocolate. Then we have 2 small offset spatulas that we're going to use to transfer them over to another sheet pan that's lined with parchment paper and a wire rack, and we're going to use that with our chocolate sprinkles and our M&Ms. I don't have a whole lot of chocolate sprinkles, so I may not be able to make the full batch, so make sure you get a ton of chocolate sprinkles. Other than that, over here on a double boiler, which is just a pot with some water on a low or simmering heat, I have my chocolate chips. I have 24 ounces, or basically 2 of those chocolate chip bags with chocolate chips, and 1 3/4 ounce of vegetable oil. And all we're doing is we're slowly melting the chocolate. We do over to a double boiler so that way we don't accidentally burn the chocolate. And the vegetable oil helps us out because we don't have to worry too much about tempering. Although if you store these cookies for a long time, you might start to see a little bit of fat bloom, so keep that in mind. And of course, to completely avoid fat bloom, you could just use the candy melts or the coating chocolate. But I do prefer the taste of real chocolate to the candy chocolate. Although if you're serving it with just for kids, they don't really notice the difference. So keep that in mind, because sometimes candy melts or coating chocolate is a little bit cheaper than real chocolate. Once your chocolate completely melts in the bowl and it's at a nice fluid consistency, we can go ahead and take it off the stove and off the double boiler and coat our cookies. Meanwhile, you still want to keep your double boiler on a simmering or a little bit higher than simmering setting, so that way in between coating the cookies, we can warm up the chocolate. Okay, you want to make sure to wipe down the bottom of your bowl so that way there's no more water on it from the double boiler, because you don't want to accidentally get any water in your chocolate, because that can ruin your chocolate. And then you just want to take your time and just coat the cookies carefully. Help the chocolate drip down. You can help try and patch up some spots that you missed or didn't get covered by using your offset spatula and kind of just manipulating the chocolate. After you've allowed the chocolate to drip down, you can go ahead and transfer your covered cookies. Alright, after you've transferred them, you want to go ahead and coat them in chocolate sprinkles. Okay, so once you've got the sprinkles on, then you just take two candies, basically M&Ms, and you just pop them on to the spider using the chocolate as glue. And that's pretty much it. Once you finish putting on the eyes, put them in the refrigerator to set up. Alright, so here are the finished tarantula cookies, or spider cookies, either one. The chocolate has set up and put in the refrigerator, and it's pretty much a solid cookie right now. If you need to, use an offset spatula to help you move them around off the sheet pan. You don't have to cool them in the refrigerator on a wire rack. Okay, so once again, those are the spider or tarantula cookies. Now keep in mind that because we didn't necessarily temper the chocolate, we still run the risk of having fat bloom, which is those whitish marks along the surface of the chocolate that show up after a chocolate bar has melted and then reset. It's not the same as chocolate chips out of the bag, because those white marks are from shipping. They get scratched and scuffed. Usually untempered chocolate is weaker, it's brittle, and doesn't have that nice snap to it. Tempered chocolate obviously has a nice snap to it and it's a little bit stronger. It can hold up a little bit better. But if you're serving these the same day or the next day, you shouldn't have to worry about it. I didn't really notice any fat bloom when I was giving these away. So, I mean, and that was like, what, almost 4 days afterward? And if you don't want to deal with real chocolate or fat bloom or anything at all, feel free to use those candy melts or coating chocolate, which works pretty similarly to chocolate. It sets up, but it's a little bit softer, doesn't have a nice snap to it. Don't forget that you can download this recipe for free on my blog, www.theauberginechef.com. And remember, The Aubergine Chef, demystifying dessert, one recipe at a time.